for the topic for the next conversation. It's a critique on Indian business writing post-reforms, their contribution to confusion and or clarity. We've been living in Bursa times since 1991. India has. And but the word Bursa seems to have suddenly become a big management reality. I think wherever you see on Twitter or in any business fence, the word Bursa keeps coming up. So to share their thoughts, I'd like to invite four of India's top writers and speakers who have been an integral part of this unique Indian travesty, and they will be in conversation with you. They will speak about how they handle it through anecdotes and references from their books. I would like to invite on stage the following. It could be a short extract. They're very letter professionals and their bios really ran in pages. Some will keep it a little brief. The first individual that I'd like to invite on the stage is Dr. R. Vaidyanathan. Professor Vaidyanathan is a professor of finance and control at Indian Institute of Management and Bangalore. He is the founder chairperson for the Center for Capital Market and Risk Management. He has published a number of articles in India and abroad. His recent book titled India Uninc, about unincorporated sector in the Indian economy, has been well received by policy planners and the market. He has also published a book on pensions, Facing the Future in collaboration with ING Global. He's working on a book on black money and tax havens in India's wealth abroad. Very critical topic. I'm sure we look forward to the book. The next person that I'd like to invite on stage is Neeraj Sinha. Could we have you on stage? Knowledge of what's an editor and former resident editor of the Economic Times, Mumbai and Bangalore. Hi Neeraj, could we have you up on seat? Neeraj is the author of Consumer India, Inside the Indian Mind and Wallet, a recommended read at the Wharton School's course on emerging economies. His second book, India Reloaded, Inside India's Resurgent Consumer Market, is due to release this month in India. He also heads planning for GRAIN in India, South and Southeast Asia. He was amongst the top 40 advertising and marketing professionals in Asia Pacific in Campaign Asia's top 40 under 40 list of 2014. Finally, I'd like to invite our moderator, Harish Bijur, up on stage, please. Harish runs a private legal consulting firm, Harish Bijur Consultants Inc., that specializes in brand and business strategy. They do cross-domain work in the area of thought leadership. They work in technology, IT, biotech, pharmaceutical, FMCG, durables, entertainment, education, media, and allied categories are a long list. And just to do a check of time, I think because we are running a very tight schedule, we'll keep the conversation to about 40 minutes.
No, we'll keep the conversation for an hour. Okay? No. Not mine. Okay. Okay, let's forget it. This is going to go on for an hour, and what we're going to do is we're going to do a quick understanding. We're going to be as crisp as possible, and let's see if we can wrap up on the Q&A time, which is possibly about 10 minutes at the end, which I've kept aside. So we might run up to 50 minutes. What's the time we're starting with at this point in time, David? 11:30. So we'll peg to finish by 12:20, if that's okay with you. Now, what I'd like to do is, first of all, let me introduce the subject to each one of you. The subject is a very quick one, which is called a critique on Indian business writing. A critique on Indian business writing post-reforms. I'm purposely highlighting the subject again, fundamentally because I think we need to be more into the subject, and particularly when you have a bunch of intellectuals, authors, and particularly people who trace history, and people who are writers themselves, we could go off track. So I'm really saying a critique on Indian business writing post-reforms. How the contribution is to either confusion or to clarity. Has it created confusion? Has it clarity. That's what we're talking about. So one of the first things I'd like to say is to those of you who are from outside the city, people like Dheeraj for sure, Joe and Shankar, you're not in Bangalore anymore. You're in Bangalore. Okay. Welcome to Startup Uru. I call it Startup Uru fundamentally because we have 5,400 startups in the city at this point of time. And 5,400 startups in a 741 square kilometer area, which means that in every square kilometer we have 8 startups, which simply means you throw a stone, you hit a startup. Okay? So in Startup Uru, possibly the next genre is going to be, startup writing and startup literature. I frankly believe this city deserves many book festivals, and here is an exciting one which has been put together by you guys. Good to be here. I think everybody has a book in him or her, for sure. Fundamentally, I think all of us have books in us. But business writers and business writing is a different genre altogether. Literally every Tom, Dick and Harish has a book in them. Even I have 2 books in me, and I'm not going to talk about them today because that's not possible to read the subject. One of the first things I'd like to state is that there is a certain degree of India centricity in the writing that's come about today. India centricity in the terms of people focusing on India very, very significantly. And I think that we need to credit Indian authors, because Indian authors have done a tremendous task. And most Indian authors actually started in the pink pages, particularly the business pages of newspapers and magazines in this country. And literally everybody emerged from there. And we were under the tutelage of people like Shankar, who were running those publications in this country. Therefore, if you really look at names in Indian business writing, many Indian business writers came out from the publications. I'm sure Dheeraj has been a columnist for a period of time, and over a period of time things came back. And therefore, when you trace the history of business literature, I think you need to credit the big publications of this country, the pink and the white publications, the business publications of this country, which created for this. I think fundamentally, over a period of time, we have emerged from writing for publications to writing our own books. There are proud names around in this room who have their own books. Dheeraj is certainly one of them, and Prof has contributions which are rich and deep. I'm going to stop at that, and I'm going to keep intervening again and again, but I'm first going to request a quick history trace of Indian business writing. And if that mic could be passed on, we'll start with you actually Shankar. And if you could pass it down this way, and the mic will keep rolling back this way in that particular order. Okay, we'll start with you. Each one of you to kindly give us your take on the Indian business writing scenario, the way you traced it. A very quick history.
I talk about newspaper, that's what I went to. Economic Times was actually Economic Times is actually the second business paper. That's close to.
Yeah, there should be. Is it on now?
No. Before that, Financial Express. Soon after, we had Economic Times. We can't hear you. It's not working. Now? Yeah. Okay. Let's push the button the wrong way. But for a good 25 26 years, business newspapers were really boring. You had very important heavy stuff that were read by economists and education and finance history. But average Joe didn't understand what is happening in the economy, much less about what is happening in specific companies or in agriculture. 1990, when Nailan came to the Economic Times, he changed the whole thing. He said, we want to make this something that is accessible to college students, housewives, managers, price their food, please. And suddenly it was choice between a cup of tea or coffee and the Economic Times. Lots of pink in color, and that gave some kind of distinct effects like Financial Times of color. And suddenly, Shri Harish this morning, we used to have Republic Day speeches or Independence Day speeches by the President of India, Redford, as a lead story on 27th January. and that used to be usually a whole lot of political spin writing. And that went from page 1 immediately to page 18. And page 1 you have Dhirubhai Ambani, HDFC. You had a whole lot of next 10-15 years stock market where people who were not heard of earlier became household names. One thing was Harish Pitu himself, but like the Lee Iacocca was not just anymore G.D. Birla or Ratan Tata or J.R.D. Tata or Dhirubhai Ambani. You had B.K. Modi and Naresh Goyal, new entrepreneurs in Almurthy. So that really made business good business reading, mainstream, general business reading. Business and appearing on page 1.
Yeah. Thanks, Shankar. In fact, Dheeraj, can I have your take on it now? One of the points that I made right at that point of time is that, publishing houses have made a huge contribution to business writing. Publishing houses somehow went crisper and crisper. They realized that consumers were wanting crisper stuff. I remember reading in the early days Economic Times articles which used to be 2,200 words. Suddenly you started reading, main edit page writing, which was 800 words. And now I'm told, the tendency is to make it even more brief as one goes. Yeah, Dheeraj, your take on this?
So, I think the point on column writing and columnist, I think that's been made, so I won't go there. And growing up in last 2 decades in the business and advertising and marketing fraternity, I think my point is that there hasn't been enough history of business writing in this country. So apart from columns, I think as a community we've been scared or we've not embraced our own thoughts in the way that perhaps we should have. So there's very little pure India-based business thinking, very little pure India-based management thinking which has been turned into books or writing which is seminal for people to refer to. Columns by say Santosh or yourself or Rama Vijayapur, those were the only literature available. I think the other genre which has come of age is the self-help genre. So lots of case study writing which has happened. Story of certain brands have been told, biographies have been told, but pure Indian theories or pure Indian management thinking, business thinking, I think we surely lack the history of writing in this country on that note. And I would partly say that maybe it's driven by a lack of apparent demand from the publishers end, because while the 100 rupees or 200 rupees chiclet or the 100, 200 rupees fiction genre has taken off in a big way. I don't know how confident publishers or distributors are about 600, 700, 800 rupees deep non-fiction business writing doing well. So I think that's still a question mark that needs to be proven for business writing to take off. So that would be one perhaps way. And I think as practitioners of business, we've been lazy and reluctant to challenge some of the Western theories. So you see those murmurs in the conference rooms, you see some murmurs in some articles which are written, but very few of us have stuck our neck out and to say what works in India is different.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, very interesting, Dheeraj, because you make a very important point that Indian writing is really about taking what happens outside, out in the West, and to that extent, it's not really about what's happening in India rather than what's happening outside. I learned it in a very negative way, even before I come to Prof. I'm going to make this point. I was traveling many years ago, and this is when a new concept dawned on me, which was in Italy. I was traveling in a prefecture in Italy, paid money in advance to get a cup of coffee. I was about to pay the money, and the guy looks at me, and I'm still a desi Indian, totally desi in the sense that when I pay money, I immediately convert the lira into Indian rupees straight away, and immediately I said 360 rupees for a cup of coffee. I was about to pay him, and the guy looks at me and says, "Would you like to suspend the coffee?" Now I say suspend the coffee. I've worked 20 years in corporate life, never ever suspended a human being, thought to myself, coffee. And the guy says, sir, there is a concept. The moment he said concept, Rob, like you, and then I also went up and I said, I want to know what this concept is. The guy looks at me. I'm just trying to tell you this to say that a Westerner actually teaches an Easterner Eastern stuff many a time. And yet we Easterners aren't really so outgoing on Eastern side. So the guy looks at me and says, you are a rich man. The moment he says you're a rich man, you don't feel good. So I said, no, not at all. And then I say, why do you say that? You come from India, he says. Then I look at him and I say, I'm not, India is a poor country and the only rich person is a person of Italian origin there. So the guy looks at me and he says, no, you come from a rich country and you have money in your pocket, therefore you are here. You pay 360 rupees for one coffee in Lira and you pay another 360 rupees, I will suspend a coffee for you. I said, what do you mean by suspended coffee? He said, Italy is a poor country. Everybody has a stomach and a bladder. Everybody wants coffee, but everybody cannot afford coffee. So he's got a white board outside his cafe facing out. If you pay 360 for your cup, you get your coffee. The second cup, he keeps it back. A poor Italian, when he goes on the street and looks in and comes in, he gives him a free cup of coffee. I asked him the true blue Indian question. I asked him a question. What do I get in return? And the guy says, blessings. Blessings. Can you imagine? He's telling me an Easterism. And then I say, and then he tells me, if you put good into the universe, good comes back to you. Do you understand that? It's an Easterism, it's my philosophy of India, it's our philosophy of India, it's the Kainat concept of India, which was popularized by Om Shanti Om for a long period of time. You put good into the universe, good comes back. We learn from the West, come back, and then I started writing about it again. And then I spun a subject called clean practice spending. Prof, your take on the history of where we stand today and a critique on it.
Okay, I'll just make a quick point. Business writing in India by and large is focused on what we all call corporate sector, companies. The corporate sector actually constitutes around 10 to 12% of the GDP. There's a huge non-corporate partnership, proprietorship firms who are the engines of growth of our economy. Our business writing unfortunately doesn't seem to be interested in that. Most of it is only on the corporate. Second, of late I am finding in the last couple of years, again, part of the business writing is becoming increasingly sponsored. Very unreliable, handout given by the corporates, repeated by the person. So some of the news item when I read, I know that it is a sponsored item. So the ability to have critical analysis is less and less nowadays. And increasingly, as you rightly pointed out, from 2,500 to something like 800 words or something is preferred. And more with Twitter coming 140 is the norm nowadays. I think more than 140 is not very. So shorter and shorter news. More and more, induced by the corporates. I think it's not a very healthy trend. This is what is my immediate take I would like to give.
Prof, you make a very pertinent point to say how much of what you read is really stuff which must be read. How much of what you read is not paid for stuff which comes out at you. And I think this is a reality not only in print but across mediums if you really look at it. But the point typically is politically correct Indian business writing is going around a bit too much. Everybody is politically correct. There's just no political incorrectness anymore. Where are those politically incorrect writers? Have you seen any of them? If so, who are they? Shankar.
Like Professor, my beef with the journalism is they're much too tolerant.
No, keep it close, very close. Yeah.
I was not too long ago, maybe 15 years ago, 10 years ago, we used to have a lot more investigative journalism, a lot more reporting on scams and scandals. To do that, sources are really like handout. It's not a corporate handout, it's a CAG handout. Or it's some government report or some Supreme Court action. Where are journalists chasing investigative stories? I don't see too much of that happening. In fact, too much, like you call it political correctness. But I think it's political correctness combined with a whole lot of, there's a whole ecosystem of pressures. You have publishers who don't want you to write stories that too critical of maybe advertisers. The government doesn't want you to write stories that shows them in a bad light. Companies don't want you to write stories that are critical of them. And I don't know if there is enough bigger pressure to pull out that all the market is there. I'm not saying all business is smart, because there's a whole lot of good stuff happening. But I think the fundamental problem in that so-called ecosystem is also business journalists today are not as well informed or as they don't have the analytical tools that we used to have. One big reason is there's suddenly such a lot of demand for this talent, explosion in broadcast journalism. We really thinned out our resources, our talent.
Interesting, Shankar, because if you really look at it, where are the failure stories? Dheeraj, this is the point I'd like to make to you. There are only success stories around us. There are no failure stories. Does it mean that Indian business has no failures at all? I mean, I've been in Indian business, I've been in Indian corporate houses. I know exactly what happens and what failures occur. There's a soft underbelly of Indian business which just never gets exposed. And I think publishers also are to be blamed for this, because publishers don't have the guts to take on subjects which are controversial. And publishers of books don't have the guts to do that. So I think there's a bit of an issue on that. So what really happens is, we have mollycoddled Indian business writing. Everything is mollycoddled, everything is soft-pedaled. We're creating an imagery which may or may not really be true. So have you discovered anybody who's done things differently in this scope? I'll come back to you, Shankar, just after Dheeraj. Yeah.
I think the business writing needs to learn from fiction writing, right? So if you see any new book being launched in fiction, whether Sachin Tendulkar's biography, they all generate controversies, right? I mean, a middle class, totally rounded person like Sachin has to resort to make a statement on the coach to sort of sell his books. So I think fiction writing has learned that you have to be provocative, you have to be controversial to be able to sell your books, and they're using that as a tool. I think the business writing needs to learn from it, because as you said, we are far too rounded. I think we don't see the audience beyond our own boardrooms, we don't see the audience beyond our business fraternity, and we're too sensitive to that audience. I think that's just one point. The second point is that, you don't have to be only provocative about what a certain company is doing, but you have to be provocative about the theories that they're using. So in my book, for example, if I might talk about it, I'm taking on this whole idea of jugaad, right? I'm sticking my neck out and saying that jugaad does more harm to India than it does good. I mean, my theory is that you see potholes on Indian roads because of jugaad. And there was a hospital in Bulandshahr in Uttar Pradesh where there were ward boys doing operations and stitching people up. And when that civic hospital was interviewed, why is this going on? The answer was, this is the talent we have on board. We don't have the money to hire more doctors, and these guys don't know how to stitch people up. And therefore, so that's where jugaad is taken. So now, when I take an idea like that and write it in a book and discuss it with fraternity, there's huge amount of polarization. So I'm getting enough big bags to say, don't beat on jugaad, because that's God's gift to India's innovation. Right? That's how we went to Mars. Right? So that will happen. But I'm going to provoke.
Absolutely. I think provocative Indian writing is important, and I'm going to come to Shankar in a bad way, because I have had lovely, affectionate feelings towards Indian jugaad in many ways. I had a bar, my car broke down near Moga once upon a time, near the Nestle plant, and I used to work for Levers there, and I had the greatest joy of my life. I went there, I had a tremendous shower with it was a 96-old shower. It was a dalda dabba, which was kept below a pump pipe, and that's Indian jugaad as well. Shankar, if you really look at this business of critiquing ourselves and say, where are the failure stories? You have a point.
I think I should mention that almost everybody gets it right sometime or the other. The people who have been doing it consistently. Outlook management is doing some really great stuff.
Sure.
They do some really good stuff. Economic Times also does some very good stuff.
Yeah.
They still take some of the best stories. So, Business Standard also.
Yeah.
You have all that tells me that we have it, and we can do it.
Yeah.
It's just that we don't get the circumstances, the opportunity to display that.
Yeah.
And one other thing is, there's a lot of good business stuff that's being information that's outside of your usual source. And some of the reports that have come out from the RBI, the Tara Board Committee report, from the government, from the Tara Committee report, Sachar Committee, these are all great pieces of work in telling so much about how India works.
No, interesting. The point I make is that we break good political circle. There's a lot in business that can be broken. We still don't have an Arnab Goswami in business space. What I mean to say is we still don't have a Times Now in business space in that. Prof, if you really look at this political correctness, this business of failure stories, I'm sure you've documented all this.
Yeah, quite a number of the failure stories are not adequately coming. Let me give an example. Nothing wrong about it. It's not again our own Malia.
Yes.
Two product lines which both of them are supposed to take in mind, right? And one is airlines, other is the liquor. And this named PVC went for these two because both the products take my customer's side. But that can't be done. Now, it's very well documented. I am very sure a large number of people in the business field know about what is happening in decades before it. But I would rather say there was a gentlemanly momentum. This is very factual. I'm not, this is true of a couple of other corporates also. One, generally we would not like to say anything negative unless things go beyond. Now for instance, you can't obviously say Malaya is doing right or it has gone. So I think that is one of the
Absolutely.
Second, I would like to make a quick observation as a teacher. I find a lot of youngsters in these business magazines and papers and other things. I am very disappointed. They require good training. I am not canvassing for business, but they require training. Because I will give you two examples without Malaysia. Recently, one of the big papers wrote a very bold letter, first page. Some 10 companies sales they added, and they told that they constitute 30% of GDP. I wrote to them telling that sales is not GDP, that is value addition. This is totally different as an economist and other. And some insipid answer came in. By and large, many business paper even today confuse lot of economics, lot of things, and then they flash it. Other example would be, recently our Prime Minister was, I think, speaking in maybe US or one of the conferences. He mentioned 12 trillion, that is in the Facebook. He mentioned 12 trillion to be our GDP. And the paper, this is not a business paper, this is Hindu, popular paper. He wrote in the front page that how it was rubbish. Actually, 12 trillion is our GDP on purchasing power parity basis. If you look at the World Bank or any statistics and other. That paper doesn't even check on this. When he wrote to them again, they were going on arguing, no, it is not. But I sent them the material. It was in Twitter. It was a long drawn out factual checking. But my point is, many of these younger people are, very enthusiastic. And of course, the second thing I am finding it very, I think it's not appropriate that any speech is good to beat the PM. This attitude I think is very, very, this I am not really happy at all. Take anything.
Okay.
Just,
Absolutely.
So I feel that business papers owe it to themselves to train these people appropriately in the various aspects of understanding economics, finance, and
Sure, Prof. You make two excellent points at this point of time. One of the first ones is this business of saying there is a quiet omerta. There is an omerta in business space which is larger than the omerta in political space. We have been breaking stuff in political space, but business space has lots more, but we don't talk about it because it's private space. But today, there's nothing private. Tomorrow you're going to have an RTI in business space, where people have to answer every question. So I think you make a very good point, Prof. And the second point is you tend to say that the young must be restrained in the manner in which they handle data. I also find there's a certain data coyness among writers. Writers don't give out good data because they don't give out useful data. They give out dead data which is of no commercial potential use for anyone today. Why is that so? And that's certainly a big issue. But let me go quickly to your first point, and I'm going to the second point, and I'm going to address this question to Shankar. Essentially, if you really look at hasty writing. There are a lot of people who are hasty writers today. In the old days, the tradition was in India, in Indian business writing, that people, once they've been in business, running a business for about 50 years, let's say, at the end of 50 years, when they're at the final stage of life, at self-actualization point, they would write a book. Okay? But then the point is, today the situation is that people who just started the business last year start writing a book. And they publish the book, maybe with a mad hope to say that my business might collapse anytime. After it collapses, at least the value of this book is going to be more than the value of my book value of my business. Why is this, and is this good, is this bad? A value comment, it's a value judgment on passes.
I think anything that comes out sooner rather than later, generally speaking, is very good. Even if these books are written by people after 6 months or 1 year in business, I think it's a damn good thing, because all this is information and intelligence and analysis, and the more educated we are as consumers, we become that much more effective and advocate, advocate. And even in our way we respond to policies and pricing pressures, so on and so forth, we reduce the arbitrage that obesity creates.
Sure. This simply means to say that a lot of people in books and then come out with your book whenever you have it, because you contribute anyway to the big business scenario. Never mind your business collapses, things will go further. Dheeraj, your take on this?
I mean, I would be, like barely 10 years in business. And at that time when John Wiley, my earlier publisher, approached me, and I was like, should I be writing a book at this stage? But my view on books is that I think the idea of books is changing. So earlier books used to be the final word. So you would write a book after 50 years of distinguished service. I think today books are about debates, right? So when I write an India story, I think I'm putting for a certain hypothesis up for debate. That may not be the final word, right?
Sure.
It's important to my mind to get those ideas out for conversations. That's one. Second quick point is that they're living really dynamic times, right? So things are changing in the span of 5 years, 10 years time, and therefore those ideas merit bringing them to fore, and therefore far more churn in writing is required rather than writing in a lifetime writing.
Sure. Dheeraj, thanks for telling us that you were 35 when you wrote your first book. You look bloody 25 now. You are on regression. He looks 25, sir. Hindi thinkers. Now see, in India, this is India, and this is Indian business. Indian business is not English run, essentially. Indian business has a huge, deep degree of Hindi going. And real businesses in India occur in the tier 2, tier 3 towns of India over a period of time. Hindi thinkers, Hindi writers. English thinkers, English writers. Is there a schism between the two? The two sets of writers who I read. I write a column in Hindi for a publication called Dainik Bhaskar. And I write columns in English as well. So I'm, facing a duality in the way in which, in the manner in which I'm communicating. I find a big difference between the two types of thinking, the two types of needs, wants, desires and aspirations of people across the spectrum. Sir, would you have a take on this to say, how does this evolve and where does it move?
Yeah. This is linked to our earlier thing about having our own models and bases. As long as we focus only on the MNCs in the country, you are not going to get any new model or thing, because you are going to repeat the same hotels and same. But if you go to Tripur, you go to Surat diamond maintenance, you go to Agra leather product, you go to Jalandhar where the sports goods are made. All these smaller, what are popularly in a way derivatively called also, they are HMP type, Hindi medium type. And they are actually the shakers and movers of Indian GDP. Take my word, the GDP is growing not due to corporate sector. It is exclusively due to partnership and cooperative firms, which are 75% in our service sector. They are the ones who really run that. We don't go into English. These journals don't worry about them, because they are dhoti clad. They are punctual and they can't communicate in English. So they are all treated as award masters. And actually they are the crucial entrepreneurs of this country. And they don't even get credit, that when they visit a bank, they are not offered a seat. Because in India, you must have a tie to tell a lie. It's very important. Otherwise, you go nowhere.
Good point, Prof. Good point. Nobody's wearing a tie. Both are wearing jackets. I have a story to prove their legs, but I won't, Prof. Okay, we'll be kind to them. Okay, business books as PR. You know, a lot of people tend to tell you, you must write a book, you'll get good PR. Business books versus learning. You know, what is the purpose of a book? Is it to self-aggrandizement as a purpose? Or is it really also contribution? Do you see any issues in this space, Shankar? Yeah. Shankar, that point is a nice one. Indians love talking, we love talking. But do we like equally writing?
Yeah, I think we do. We don't have to.
I'm going to come to the audience in exactly 7 minutes for the audience Q&A. Yeah.
You don't have to consider writing in the traditional sense, you know, writing long sentences in paragraphs and slowly with the beginning and middle and the end.
Yeah.
A tweet is writing.
Yeah.
Tomorrow's
Absolutely.
lesson or might be
Absolutely.
crowd source through tweets.
Excellent. Excellent. Shankar, the point you make is very important because you know today, as I said, every Tom, Dick and Harish is a publisher, is a writer, but we are also publishers because every one of us has a Twitter handle. How many of you have a Twitter handle out here? Yeah? Okay. So all of us are publishers. We write. I mean, you know, when I tweet something, I get lambasted, bashed, trolled like nobody's business in nanoseconds. Once I get on this stage, we'll know whether, you know, we'll be lambasted or kicked or whatever. But if you really ask me, there's a certain democratization that's come by in business writing as well. And the brevity is coming in. I know of people who write love letters in 140 characters. In 140 characters flat. And so if you really look at it, I think publishing and the ability to communicate has a funny writing but serious subject.
Times where things need to be surfaced, right? I mean, every man is expected to have a six-pack ab and all our products need to look shiny, sexy, all our music needs to be beaty, and as I say, Karwa Chauth is becoming an actor festival.
Yeah.
So that is like...
And Cafe Coffee Day, you will never call Cafe Coffee Day, you will say Sicily.
Right? So you look at that.
The more macho you say Sicily, you are there.
So living in those styles, and therefore writing also has to sort of come from there. And I think a lot of earlier business writing was self-referential, it was quite steep inside. But if your ideas are not reaching out, then they're not worth. You might have to keep them in your PowerPoint or your C drive. And therefore I'm trying to do narrative writing in business writing. So I'm trying to be anecdotal, I'm trying to tell stories, I'm trying to crack a few jokes. So there's an easy read, right? So if your delivery mechanism is easy, you can shove in a few bit-up pills much more easy. That's what I'm trying to do.
Good one. So I proscribe to your viewpoint in totality. We will go another for 4 minutes before I come to the audience Q&A. If you really look at it, then my next question is there a method to the naming of a book? Because you know, names of books seems to create attraction. Okay? And I'll tell you the name of my next book in a while after you answer this question. I want to know, is there a method and is there any exciting book name you have heard of, Prof? Any exciting book name? Because book names are, you know, like changing. They aren't as serious as they used to be. What's the name of your book?
My book is called India Reloaded, and I write for two audiences. I write for global audience, so India Reloaded has a Palgrave Global Edition. So if you're on the shelves of, say, Singapore or London or New York, you've got to mark out India upfront, and you've got to mark out consumer. So those are two givens around which you have to play with.
Nicely done. I mean, you know, it's in a search engine optimization. India and Reloaded is what I would of course have called your book India Unloaded. You know, after having heard of your book. Any take on this, Shankar, in terms of names of books? Not really. Okay, Prof? Any?
India Incorporated.
India Unincorporated. Okay. Unnamed. Okay.
No, many people are curious what it is. It's like, you know, I learned in Atlanta when I was there, just for one day. It was written 7 bells coffee shop, but there were only 6 bells inside, outside. So many people go and 6 bells are there, you have written 7 bells on it. You come up, sit and have a cup of coffee. The whole idea is so like, I mean, many people ask, what is this? I said, come. You know. If you buy the book, you will get to know what it talks about. Maybe, it could be a teaser or a method to reading. My only concern is what it was writing telling about two people, writing has substantially increased, I would say, after the social media, since he mentioned about that. But I am concerned that reading has significantly fallen. I will tell you, I have been a teacher for 30 years. Last couple of weeks, my children don't read. They don't want to read. See, they say it's too much, sir. Everybody wants a PowerPoint, some 6 bullets, maximum. 33 hours I taught a course for investment, which I have been teaching for ages. One girl came and asked me recently, sir, can you tell very briefly in one slide? I told, what is this 30 hours? The hours you spend, sir, that is what you are paid for. I said, what more? No, really I am telling, I'm not sure whether that Tolstoy's 500-page book will sell at all. Sell in the sense it may sell, but people buy and read. Many people buy books because it's good to keep in the drawing room. My books are all in the background. I have written the title so they can keep like that. So that is something which I think we should be doing. Since he mentioned about Twitter, I should, modesty is my middle name. I am on Twitter.
All right.
It is R2000.
Oh God, he is getting a followership which is brilliant now. R2000. Okay. Now,
Come there.
Yeah.
A mad 25,000 crowd
is fully fighting, and you're also going to fight with him. Now, in addition to that, so I've got exactly 2 minutes before I throw it to the audience. I'm asking your names for a book because I was talking to my publisher, and I'm writing a book on customer service mechanisms. And the theory of customer service is pyramid in this way. Right at the bottom, I have a theory called customer service, which all of us know. Above it is called customer satisfaction. We marketing people are very good at creating jargon. This is not my jargon. This is general jargon. Customer satisfaction leads to customer delight. We saw that for yellow smiley. And then customer delight leads to customer ecstasy, because customer must not only be happy but ecstatic. And my book is on the subject which is at the top of the pinnacle, and I've titled my book Customer Orgasm. Okay? Because the idea is, and my publisher tells me that your book will sell only for the title. Okay? And that's an insult. Now, coming from a publisher, I need to take it seriously. Having said that, absolutely, sir. So if you really look at it, I think if there are any questions, we'd like to take questions now. And at the end of the session, I'm going to give you all the Twitter handles of all the 4 people out here, so that each one of us, so that you can always interact later. Let's start with the first question.